Well, day two of my hunting season. I just shot at a spike buck, and all indicators point that I missed badly. The only thing that's disturbing is I can't find the bolt. But there's absolutely no blood anywhere. That's the crazy. Even at the spot that I shot him, or at him, there's no blood. And then he even stopped. You know, after the initial contact that we had, he stopped. And I went to the spot where he stopped and there was no blood. And I think what might have happened is my crossbow my bolt arrow might have went under him and hit and piled into the dirt. That's the only other explanation for this one, or it's stuck in him and he's just done taking off and he ain't stopping. Because I seen him cut across. Because when I shot him, I just sat there and watched him. I just sat at my stand. And then back over here, I seen a deer run right back through there where I'm walking from. That was like 40 minutes ago. And there ain't nothing piled up under branches or nothing. And at that point, I'm on other people's property. You know? I've walked everywhere, man. No blood, nowhere. So I'm thinking, from where I shot, the arrow went under him. And it piled into the ground, or the knock fell off as it hit the ground or something, hit this tree over here. I even walked all the way out because he cut out when my stand's here. I shot him here, like right over there, right where my crossbow is, and he jetted out towards the field, and he hooked right and stopped. And I watched him there for a minute, and then a few moments later, I seen a deer just trucking it all the way through here. So I think he jumped it. I think he jumped the arrow, and I'll show you. I think it went down into this pile of mess here, and he jumped that arrow. Honestly, I think that's what might have happened, but I would have found it by now. And it's not stuck in a tree, but I mean, and the only alternative, it's stuck in him. And you know, I've shot a deer before in the same area and it didn't die. Whether he's gonna die or not, by the looks of it, probably not. I'd probably buried that arrow somewhere down in here. Day two's a disappointment. Day one was fun, a lot of interactions, almost a chance. Day two came with a shot. You know, a pretty good shot and a pretty good attempt. Everything lined up. The deer went where I needed to go, but I guess it's lack of execution. So you know, I looked for that deer for about an hour and a half. Didn't find it, and you know, when I took the shot, I noticed that it came off funky from the crossbow. You know, as soon as it left, and you know, I caught it in flight. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look good. And you just have that feeling. I mean, it's like shooting firearms. You know where you need to put the bullet, but it doesn't go there, and you kind of start guessing of what could be the problem. So it was a little spike buck came up, and some people be like, why are you shooting spikes? I don't care. I have limited opportunities, and I have limited time to get this done and fill my freezer. That's why. If you don't like it, go somewhere else. Day one was exciting. I saw target bucks. I saw a lot of bucks. Day two was disappointing in that regards. So this buck came out of nowhere. It was starting to get a little bit chilly. You know what I'm saying? I was waiting for it. Hopefully, the sun to come out and heat up. But this buck took this path. I've never noticed this path before. So it came up right in front of me. And I had cleared. I was like, you never know. They make these paths throughout the woods, and sometimes you don't notice them, sometimes you don't. This is one I didn't notice, but I had a camera that was facing a different direction. So now I kind of turned that camera to kind of at least catch a section of that other path. So he comes up the path, and there's a tree. I got about this much wide of a gap to shoot through, and that's more comfortable than the other one that I had. So I was like, okay. So I looked over there, and he's kind of got his nose, he's sniffing, his tongue's going. I'm like, uh-oh, at that point. So it kind of, starts doing the neck thing, kind of, what's that? What's over there? Because this is a straight shot directly to my stand that I'm looking at. So there's a tree there's a tree here. So I kind of go on the other side of the tree, and he's looking that way. I can see his nose, kind of poking out there. It's not a big tree, but I'm still blocking his sight here, so I could pick up my crossbow. So I picked it up, and then I kind of ducked around this tree again and seen him. He's looking towards the ag field. So pick up my bow, and I'm like, well, if he can go a little bit more to the left here and turn, I'm going to take the shot. I need to fill a tag. I know it would be my buck tag, and everybody talks about, they want to get the biggest swamp donkey in the area. And I've had that encounter, and it's a very fun encounter to have. But I have to take what's given to me at this spot. I can't really pass up on everything. I mean, there's exceptions. This was a okay sized deer. This is going to get me on the board. This is going to start putting meat in the freezer because there's a lot of different deer in the area and a lot of bigger does and things like that. This guy just happened to come at the wrong time, and so he walks forward even more. And now I'm really looking at him, and I'm like, yeah, he's a decent size. He's 80 to 100 pounds, somewhere in there. I'm like, that's doable. So he comes in there, and I go back around that tree, and I pick up the crossbow, and then I lean, and I put it up there. And like, if he turns, and then his shoulder gets into that gap, I'm like, it's a done deal. This is like a 21 yard shot. This is a chip shot for me. And he turns, and his shoulder comes up in the middle of my crosshairs. Compensate just a little bit, back of the shoulder, take the shot. And as I took the shot, it didn't look right. Coming off the crossbow, it didn't look like. And then his reaction was like, he jumped back a little bit, and then he took off, and then he made a right. So I was like, whoa here. I'm like, why did he do that? And then as I leaned over and looked where he was going, he stopped. And I'm like, is he going to fall there? You know what I'm saying? And he looks back at the trail, puts his nose in the air, and he walks away. So I'm like, I don't know. So, I'm waiting there, and he's gone. So I call Cindy. I tell her, I said, look, I pulled the trigger on this spike buck, but it didn't look good coming off, and he stopped and looked back. Like, I've shot a bunch of deer, you know, and every time I shot them, they haven't had, you know, the faintest idea of stopping and turning back and looking, you know. So and I'm talking to her on the phone, and all of a sudden this deer comes ripping back into the woods, and it's jumping logs, it's doing its thing, and it's gone. I think that was that spike buck. And I told her, you know, the shot didn't look good, and I think I missed. I said, I don't know how I missed, but now I know I missed, because that's not the reaction that I've seen before for a deer, especially a deer that's gotten hit. In that same vicinity, I've shot a deer that I've hit, and it's ran and it stopped before, but then it just takes off. Like, it didn't look back. It just, you know, it's starting to get woozy, and then it takes off. And I tracked that deer for 2 days, and I never found her, and she showed back up on the property I was living on, the next spring. And you could tell because she had a wound there, and she was limping a little bit. So that was a missed opportunity there. I cannot be missing these opportunities. So, you know, I'm sitting up in the stand talking to her. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. We're going back and forth. We're talking about. And I've had trouble with this crossbow before, and it's not held zero before. I don't know if it's the knocking around sometimes, or, you know, when you're pulling your rope up, you know, you kind of, I've done it, you know, kind of knock it against the tree stand, and it's not held zero before. So, I mean, it's not the awesomest crossbow out there. This is a real, you know, bottom of the barrel crossbow, because that's all I can afford. And so, 20-30 minutes go by, and I'm talking to her. She's like, well, you know, are you going to go down there? I said, yeah, I'm going to go down there and check now. Like, that deer's long gone, and if he's piled up, you know, and he just spooked another deer out of there, I'm gonna catch him down there. And, you know, if I bump him, you know, unfortunately I bump him. You don't want to do that. You just want them to expire right there. So I go down there. I walk down to the spot, and again I look for my spot to where the animal was, and I cannot find the arrow. And I'm like, oh man. I'm like, I wonder if it's stuck in him. Maybe that's why he stopped. But he didn't act. I didn't see it. It wasn't like he was so far out of sight. He just, you know, I could really tell. I could really look at him. And I looked around, and I told Sydney on the phone, I'm like, first of all, there's no blood. I mean, maybe down here further, they'll start to be showing signs of blood. Like, I've shot deer, and they've bled. You know what I'm saying? When you hit them, even in a spot you didn't mean to shoot them at, you know, there's still signs there. But again, I couldn't find the arrow. But I've had times where I've shot, you know, an arrow and, you know, buried it and never found it, or it's hit a tree and the knock comes off and the arrow kinds of shatter, you know, and it's hard to find. I found pieces of one that went through a deer and then hit the tree and disintegrated. You know, it happens like that sometimes, for me anyways. That's what I've experienced. So I'm looking around in a spot where he was at, where I shot, where I know if I shot him, this is where, even if it was a passer, this is where it should be at, and I never found it. So I'm like, well, that deer went that way, and if he's down here, I'm going to bump him. You know, so I walked out. I at least walked the trail to where he ran out of the woods, and there's still no blood. And he had to jump over a big log, and then, you know, everything around there is green, and it's going to be easy to pick up. The trees at that point weren't really turning, so there's no colored leaves on the ground. Everything's green, and blood will stick out. So I even walked down into this other portion and went to the spot where he stopped. If he stopped there and I hit him, there's got to be even if it's not, you know, a really critical shot, there should be some kind of sign there. And there was nothing there. And I was like, man. So I walked the trail where I seen that other deer go through the woods, and I walked all the way back up there came back around to where I shot him originally, and then walked back up this other trail. And I'm like, I'm not kicking anything up. I like walk back to the spot. I tell her I'll be, I tell Cindy I'll be home, and I'm just thinking to myself, that's just a miss. The arrow's probably buried into the ground somewhere, and the nock is covered up. That's why I can't find it. I don't know, or it's in a tree. So I started checking the trees, and I'm like, well, I'm gonna get out of here because I'm walking around here, and if he is somewhere, I'll come back and I'll look. So I'll come back tomorrow and look. So I go to the stand, pick up all my stuff, go home. And, I'm sitting there talking to Cindy, and I'm saying to her, the shot looked weird. Like, it didn't go where I needed it to go. And I said, I swear I missed that deer. There's no signs, no nothing. Plus, that deer that just bolted through the woods. I don't know what's going on. I said, if it's anything, maybe the crossbow lost 0, and that's devastating. So I set the bag out there. I grab another arrow, the same arrow. I'm using these pile drivers from Carbon Express, and it had a Montec G5 broadhead on there. And I'm like, well, I'm going to check 0 on this crossbow. That's all I can do. I mean, so I shot one of the arrows, man, and it was so far off. I was astonished, So I shot at the bag. And, the bullseye's here. Dude, this shot is way off, almost into the left-hand corner of the bag. And I'm like, well, that's why, I thought it was funny, and I thought it went left. And that's probably why he reacted when the arrow passed in front of him, because it went left, and he jerked back, and then he took off. And I was like, how is this gonna, be? So I got the arrow, put it back over here. I'm like, well, I'm going to check 0 on the the scope on the crossbow. I got no choice here, So I shot it, and it was dead in the center. And I'm like, I don't know what's going on here. So I take that one out. I shoot it again just to make sure, and it's dead. It's dead in the center of the bullseye. And then, Cindy's looking at the arrow, and she's looking at the broadhead, and she's like, look at this broadhead, and she's holding it, and she's balancing it. She's like, there's a lot of front end weight to this, and we did a little bit of research, man, and, heavier broadheads aren't necessarily the better option, because the deer that I shot last year, I was just using some, I think they were called Velocities or something like that. They weren't like some huge name brand, and I shot 2 deer and killed them. And I was like, I don't know. And it was probably a lighter broadhead, so I grabbed them. I'm like, yeah, we kind of measured them up, and yeah, that Montec's heavier than the other broadhead. I said, maybe that's not the setup for this. So then I took it and shot it again, and yeah, it's pretty accurate. So I had to take off the Montecs and then grab my older broadheads and put those on there. So lesson learned. And what's weird is I zeroed the crossbow and used those Montecs, and they were pretty good. And I was like, I don't know why they're so off now. So I don't know how to explain that. I don't. So day 3 is tomorrow. So I'm gonna take those out there, and hopefully I get a shot again. Definitely gonna check 0. But that was a disappointing day. Again, I can't waste opportunities, and especially good opportunities like that. Disappointing day, day 2. With all that being said, I'd like to thank my old and my new subscribers, just the people that, slip through. I greatly do appreciate that. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. And coming up is day 3. Catch you on the next one.